Episode number 4.
The Black Hawk's rotors carved through the desert air like a mechanical predator, kicking up clouds of sand that stung the eyes and filled the lungs with grit. Staff Sergeant Maya Chen pressed her face against the small window, watching the sprawling military complex emerge from the heat shimmer below. Fort Braxton wasn't on any public map. It existed in the shadow world where America's most lethal operators honed their skills away from prying eyes. This was where legends were born and careers were destroyed, where only the absolute elite earned the right to call themselves the best of the best. Maya's stomach tightened as the helicopter touched down with a bone-jarring thud. She'd faced Taliban fighters in the mountains of Afghanistan, survived 3 IED explosions, and earned more commendations than most soldiers saw in a lifetime, but stepping onto this tarmac felt different. This wasn't about survival anymore. This was about proving she belonged among the most feared warriors in the world. The moment her boots hit the concrete, she felt the weight of a dozen stairs. Navy SEALs, Army Rangers, Marine Force Recon, and Delta Force operators stood in loose clusters around the landing zone, their conversations dying as they took in the new arrival. Maya stood barely 52 in her combat boots, her slight frame dwarfed by the towering figures around her. She could practically hear their thoughts. "What's a little girl doing here?" Well, drawled a voice thick with southern accent. "Looks like someone took a wrong turn at the Girl Scout convention." The comment came from Petty Officer First Class Derek Hammer Jackson, a SEAL whose reputation for brutality in close-quarters combat was matched only by his ego. Standing 6'4" with arms like tree trunks, he looked like he could bench press a small car. His teammates, equally imposing specimens of military might, chuckled at his joke, their eyes scanning Maya like predators sizing up prey. Maya said nothing, but her right hand unconsciously moved to her neck, fingers tracing the jagged scar that ran from her ear to her collarbone. The wolf-shaped mark was a souvenir from Kandahar province, where a Taliban blade had come within millimeters of ending her life. Most people assumed it was from an accident, maybe a childhood mishap. They never imagined it was the calling card of Afghanistan's most feared sniper, a man who'd sworn to carve his mark into every American soldier he killed. "Cat got your tongue, sweetheart," Jackson pressed, stepping closer. His shadow fell across Maya like a dark cloud. "Or maybe you're just realizing you're in way over your head." The other operators formed a loose semicircle, their body language making it clear this was some kind of initiation ritual. Maya had seen it before, the alpha males establishing dominance, testing the newcomer's resolve. In her previous units, her reputation had preceded her. Here, she was starting from zero. "I'm Staff Sergeant Chen," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the hostile reception. "Reporting for Joint Operations Training." "Staff Sergeant," a Marine Force Recon operator named Rodriguez laughed. "What you do to earn those stripes, file paperwork really fast." More laughter rippled through the group. Maya felt heat rising in her cheeks but kept her expression neutral. She'd learned long ago that showing emotion in these situations only made things worse. Instead, she focused on cataloging details about each man, their stance, their gear, the way they carried themselves. Old habits from the battlefield, where reading people correctly meant the difference between life and death. "All right, ladies, playtime's over," barked Master Sergeant Williams, the training coordinator who'd emerged from a nearby building. He was a weathered veteran with gray stubble and eyes that had seen too much combat. "Grab your gear and form up. We've got a schedule to keep." The group began moving toward the equipment shed, but Maya noticed the subtle way they excluded her from their conversations. When she tried to fall in step with Jackson's team, they unconsciously shifted to block her out. It was like being invisible, except worse. She was visible enough to be dismissed. The equipment shed was a warehouse-sized building filled with every piece of military hardware imaginable. Assault rifles, sniper systems, explosives, communications gear, and tactical equipment lined the walls in perfect order. Maya made her way to the sniper section, where her custom rifle case waited among the standard-issue weapons. She opened the case with practiced efficiency, revealing a heavily modified M24 sniper weapon system that looked more like a work of art than a tool of war. Every component had been carefully selected and tuned. The barrel was custom machined for her specific ammunition. The scope was a military-grade optic that cost more than most people's cars, and the stock had been adjusted to fit her smaller frame perfectly. This rifle was an extension of her body, as familiar as her own heartbeat. "Nice toy," commented Sergeant First Class Mike Bulldog Peterson, an Army Ranger whose own sniper rifle looked impressive until compared to Maya's setup. "Daddy buy that for you." Maya's jaw tightened, but she continued her equipment check without responding. She methodically inspected every component, testing the bolt action, checking the scope alignment, and verifying her ammunition count. Each movement was precise and professional, the result of thousands of hours of training and real-world application. "I asked you a question," Peterson pressed, moving closer. "Where'd a little girl like you get hardware like that?" "Same place you got yours," Maya replied without looking up. "The armory." "Bullshit, that's custom work. Probably cost 20 grand easy." Peterson's voice carried a note of genuine curiosity mixed with suspicion. "What's your story, Chen? Rich parents, connected family?" Maya finally looked up, meeting his gaze directly. "My story is classified above your pay grade." The response hit like a slap. Peterson's face flushed red, and several nearby operators turned to watch the exchange. In the military hierarchy, suggesting someone lacked sufficient clearance was a serious insult, especially among elite units where security clearances were badges of honor. "Listen here, you little," Peterson started, but Williams's voice cut through the tension. "Briefing room 5 minutes, move your asses." The group filed into an adjacent room where a large screen displayed satellite imagery of a mock compound. Williams stood at the front, his expression serious despite the training nature of their mission. "Today's exercise is a hostage rescue scenario," he began, clicking through slides that showed building layouts and enemy positions. "Intelligence indicates high-value targets are being held in this compound. Your mission is to neutralize all hostiles and extract the packages without casualties." Maya studied the imagery with professional interest, automatically identifying sniper positions, escape routes, and potential ambush points. Her mind worked like a tactical computer, processing angles, distances, and sight lines. She could see at least 3 obvious overwatch positions that would give a sniper commanding views of the entire compound. "Teams will be mixed units," Williams continued. "Jackson, your team leader. Chen, Rodriguez, Peterson, and Thompson, you're with him." Maya felt her heart sink. Being assigned to Jackson's team was like being thrown to the wolves. She could already see the calculation in his eyes, how to use her as a liability rather than an asset. "Sir," Jackson raised his hand. "Request permission to adjust team composition. I don't think." "Denied," Williams cut him off. "The whole point of this exercise is learning to work with unfamiliar personnel. Deal with it." As the briefing continued, Maya noticed her teammates exchanging glances and subtle gestures. They were already planning the mission without her input, treating her like dead weight they'd have to carry. When Williams asked for questions, Jackson spoke up. "What about equipment assignments? Who's handling what roles?" "That's for team leaders to decide," Williams replied. "Use your people's strengths." Jackson's smile was predatory. "Roger that, sir." 20 minutes later, the team was gearing up for the exercise. Maya had loaded her rifle and prepared her equipment, expecting to be assigned to overwatch or counter-sniper duties, the roles that made the most sense given her specialization. Instead, Jackson approached with a different plan. "Chen, you're on equipment duty," he announced, not bothering to make it sound like anything other than a dismissal. "Stay back with the vehicles and monitor our gear." "Sir, I'm a sniper," Maya protested. "I should be providing overwatch or—" You should be following orders. Jackson cut her off. This is a dynamic entry situation. We need operators who can handle close quarters combat, not someone who might freeze up when things get hot. The insult stung because it was so far from the truth. Maya had more close quarters combat experience than anyone on the team, but her slight build made it easy for them to assume otherwise. She bit back her response, knowing that arguing would only reinforce their perception of her as difficult. "Understood, sir," she said through gritted teeth. As the team moved out toward the mock compound, Maya was left behind with the vehicles and spare equipment. She watched through binoculars as Jackson led his men toward the target building, their movements sloppy and predictable. They were good operators individually, but they moved like strangers rather than a cohesive unit. From her position, Maya could see things they couldn't. 3 sniper positions in the surrounding buildings had clear lines of sight on their approach route. If this were a real mission, Jackson's team would be walking into a killing field. She keyed her radio to warn them. "Overwatch to team leader. You have potential sniper positions at your 10 and 2 o'clock. Elevated positions in the Overwatch, maintain radio silence unless you have actionable intelligence," Jackson's voice crackled back. "We've got this handled." Maya watched in growing frustration as the team approached the compound without proper reconnaissance. They were treating this like a video game rather than a tactical exercise, relying on their individual skills rather than proper planning and coordination. When they breached the main building, she could hear the chaos over the radio, confused shouts, overlapping commands, and the distinctive sound of simulation rounds being fired. Contact left, contact left. Where the hell did that come from? I'm hit, man down. The exercise was falling apart, and Maya could see exactly why. The opposing force had positioned themselves in the blind spots her teammates had ignored, using the very sniper positions she tried to warn them about. Jackson's aggressive approach had walked them straight into an ambush. "This is team leader," Jackson's voice was strained. "We're taking heavy fire from multiple positions. Request immediate support." Maya grabbed her rifle and started moving toward a better vantage point, but Williams's voice stopped her cold. "Negative on support. This is your mission, Jackson. Figure it out." For the next 20 minutes, Maya listened to her team struggle against an enemy force that was systematically dismantling their assault. The opposing force was made up of instructors, seasoned veterans who knew every trick in the book. They were using Jackson's overconfidence against him, letting his team commit to bad positions before springing their traps. "God damn it," Peterson's voice exploded over the radio. "Where are these guys shooting from? I can't see shit." Maya could see everything. From her position, the entire tactical situation was laid out like a chess board. She could identify every enemy position, every line of sight, every weakness in their defense. But she was stuck on the sidelines, watching her teammates fail because of their own prejudice. The exercise finally ended with Jackson's team suffering 60% casualties and failing to rescue any hostages. As they trudged back to the vehicles, their faces were grim with the sting of defeat. Maya could see the frustration and embarrassment in their movements. These were elite operators who weren't used to failing. "Well, that was a clusterfuck," Rodriguez muttered, pulling off his helmet. "Those instructors knew exactly where we were going to be." "It's like they could see us coming from a mile away," Peterson added, his earlier bravado completely deflated. Jackson said nothing, but Maya could see him processing the failure, trying to figure out what had gone wrong. His eyes briefly met hers, and she saw something flicker there, not quite respect, but perhaps the beginning of doubt about his assumptions. That night in the barracks, Maya lay on her narrow bunk listening to her teammates conduct their post-mission analysis. They were good soldiers, she realized, just blinded by their own biases. They discussed tactics and positioning, trying to understand how the instructors had outmaneuvered them so completely. "I still don't get how they knew our approach route," Thompson said from across the room. "We followed standard procedures." "Maybe too standard," Rodriguez replied. "These instructors have probably seen every textbook approach 1,000 times." Maya wanted to tell them about the sniper positions she'd identified, about the obvious ambush points they'd ignored, about the dozen tactical errors that had doomed their mission from the start. But she knew they wouldn't listen. Not yet. Instead, she closed her eyes and let her mind drift back to Afghanistan, to a mountainside outside Kandahar where she'd spent 3 days in a hide site, waiting for a shot that would save the lives of an entire platoon. The Taliban commander who'd been hunting American patrols, the one who'd sworn to carve his mark into every soldier he killed, had finally made a mistake. One shot, 1,247 meters, through a window no bigger than a dinner plate. The wolf-shaped scar on her neck throbbed with the memory. Tomorrow, she told herself, would be different. Tomorrow, they'd learn what Iron Wolf really meant. Dawn broke over Fort Braxton like a crimson wound across the desert sky, and Maya Chen was already awake. She'd learned long ago that sleep was a luxury in the field, better to be alert and ready than caught off guard. Around her, the barracks stirred with the sounds of elite operators preparing for another day of training, but the atmosphere felt different. Yesterday's failure hung in the air like smoke from a battlefield. Jackson moved through his morning routine with mechanical precision, but Maya could see the tension in his shoulders. Elite operators didn't handle failure well, especially public failure in front of instructors who were evaluating their performance. His teammates were equally subdued, their usual bravado replaced by the grim determination of soldiers who knew they had something to prove. "Listen up," Jackson announced as the team gathered around the equipment table. "Yesterday was a learning experience. Today, we do better." Maya noticed he didn't look at her when he spoke. In his mind, she was still the weak link, the liability that had been forced onto his team. The fact that she tried to warn them about the sniper positions had been conveniently forgotten or dismissed as irrelevant. Master Sergeant Williams appeared in the doorway, his weathered face giving nothing away. "Gear up, people. Today's exercise is live-fire urban warfare. The gloves are coming off." A ripple of excitement went through the assembled operators. Live-fire exercises were rare and dangerous, using real ammunition in controlled scenarios that pushed the boundaries of safety. Only the most elite units were trusted with this level of training, and the margin for error was razor-thin. "The scenario is a terrorist cell holed up in a multi-story building," Williams continued, his voice carrying the weight of real combat experience. "Intelligence indicates they have hostages and are planning an imminent attack. Your mission is to neutralize all threats and secure the building." Maya felt her pulse quicken. This was the kind of scenario she'd trained for her entire career, the type of mission where her skills could make the difference between success and catastrophe. She began mentally cataloging the equipment she'd need: her custom rifle, specialized ammunition, range-finding equipment, and communications gear. "Team assignments remain the same," Williams added, crushing Maya's hopes before they could fully form. "Jackson, your team takes point. Chen, you're still on support duty." The dismissal hit like a physical blow. Maya watched as her teammates received their mission briefings and equipment assignments, while she was relegated to the sidelines once again. Jackson didn't even bother to include her in the tactical planning session, treating her like a piece of equipment rather than a trained operator. But as the team moved toward the training facility, Maya noticed something that made her blood run cold. The opposing force wasn't made up of the usual instructors. Instead, she recognized the distinctive gear and bearing of Delta Force operators, the most elite special operations unit in the American military. These weren't trainers playing the role of terrorists. These were apex predators who had earned their reputations in the world's most dangerous conflicts. "Jesus," Peterson muttered under his breath. "They brought in the unit for this." Rodriguez's face had gone pale. "This isn't going to be like yesterday." These guys don't play games. Maya felt a chill of premonition. Delta Force operators didn't participate in routine training exercises. Their presence meant this scenario was designed to push the participants beyond their limits, to create a level of stress and chaos that would reveal who truly belonged among the elite. The training facility was a multi-story concrete structure designed to replicate urban combat environments. Windows had been blown out and walls damaged to simulate battle damage, creating a maze of sight lines and potential ambush points. Maya could see movement in the upper floors, shadows that appeared and disappeared too quickly to track. "Overwatch position is that water tower," Jackson announced, pointing to a structure roughly 800 meters from the target building. "Chen, get up there and try not to get in the way." Maya bit back her response and began the climb up the water tower's maintenance ladder. The metal rungs were hot from the desert sun, and by the time she reached the top, sweat was stinging her eyes. But the elevated position gave her a commanding view of the entire training area, and what she saw made her stomach drop. The Delta Force operators had turned the building into a fortress. She could identify at least 6 sniper positions, multiple machine gun nests, and what appeared to be improvised explosive devices positioned at key choke points. This wasn't a training exercise. It was a carefully orchestrated killing field designed to test every aspect of the assault team's capabilities. Maya keyed her radio to warn Jackson's team, but before she could speak, Williams's voice crackled over the command frequency. "All stations be advised. Today's exercise includes unscripted elements. The opposing force has been given latitude to adapt and improvise. Expect the unexpected." The word sent ice through Maya's veins. Unscripted elements, in military parlance, meant the Delta operators were authorized to deviate from the planned scenario, to create chaos and confusion that would test the assault team's ability to adapt under pressure. It was the kind of training that separated true warriors from mere soldiers. Jackson's team approached the building with textbook precision, but Maya could see they were walking into a trap. The Delta operators had anticipated their approach route and positioned themselves accordingly. She watched in growing horror as her teammates moved through the kill zone, completely unaware of the crosshairs tracking their every step. "Team leader, this is Overwatch," Maya transmitted urgently. "You have multiple sniper positions tracking your movement. Recommend immediate course correction." "Overwatch, maintain radio silence unless you have confirmed targets," Jackson's voice snapped back. "We're following the plan." Maya wanted to scream. The plan was based on yesterday's scenario, but the Delta operators had completely changed the tactical situation. She could see muzzle flashes positioning themselves in windows, preparing for the ambush that would devastate Jackson's team. The first explosion came without warning. A massive flash and thunderclap erupted from the building's ground floor, followed immediately by the distinctive crack of high-velocity rifle fire. Maya watched in horror as Jackson's team dove for cover, their careful formation dissolving into chaos as they found themselves under attack from multiple directions simultaneously. "Contact, contact. We're taking fire from the building." "Where the hell did that come from?" "I can't see the shooters." The radio erupted with overlapping voices as Jackson's team struggled to identify their attackers. Maya could see everything from her elevated position: Delta snipers firing from concealed positions, machine gunners laying down suppressing fire, and what appeared to be a counter-assault team moving to flank Jackson's position. But this wasn't the controlled chaos of yesterday's exercise. The Delta operators were using live ammunition, and while the rounds were non-lethal training munitions, they could still cause serious injury at close range. Maya watched one of her teammates, Thompson, take a direct hit to the chest that sent him sprawling behind a concrete barrier. "Man down," Thompson's hit. "Where's the medic? We need immediate extraction." Maya's training took over. She began scanning the building through her rifle scope, identifying targets and calculating firing solutions. Her custom rifle was loaded with training rounds, but they were still lethal at long range if she could find the right shots. The first target presented itself in a third-floor window, a Delta sniper who had been systematically picking off Jackson's team. Maya could see the muzzle flash and the distinctive outline of a rifle barrel. Range, 847 meters. Wind, minimal. Target, stationary. She keyed her radio again. Team leader, I have eyes on hostile sniper, third floor, northwest corner. Request permission to engage. Negative, stay in position and observe only. Maya watched in frustration as the Delta sniper continued his methodical destruction of her team. Peterson went down next, followed by Rodriguez. Jackson himself was pinned behind inadequate cover, unable to advance or retreat. Then the situation deteriorated further. A new voice crackled over the radio, calm, professional, and utterly terrifying in its implications. All stations, this is Control. Exercise parameters have been modified. Opposing force is now authorized to use enhanced tactics. Maya felt her blood turn to ice. Enhanced tactics was military code for techniques that pushed the boundaries of training safety. It meant the Delta operators were about to escalate the scenario beyond anything the assault team had prepared for. The second explosion was larger than the first, and this time Maya could see the source. A controlled demolition that brought down part of the building's facade, creating new firing positions and blocking Jackson's primary escape route. Dust and debris filled the air, reducing visibility to near zero. We're trapped. Jackson's voice was strained with panic. They've cut off our exfil route. Team leader, this is Overwatch, Maya transmitted, her voice steady despite the chaos below. I can see your position. You have hostiles moving to flank you from the east. Recommend immediate displacement to the south. I can't see shit through this dust. Where are they? Maya began calling out enemy positions, using her elevated vantage point to guide her trapped teammates. Hostile team moving along the eastern wall, approximately 200 meters from your position. They're using the debris for concealment. I still can't see them. Trust me, Maya said, her voice carrying a note of authority that hadn't been there before. Move south along the concrete barrier. There's a drainage ditch that will give you concealment. For the first time since the exercise began, Jackson followed her guidance without argument. Maya watched as her teammates began moving according to her directions, using her eyes as their own in the chaos of the urban battlefield. But the Delta operators weren't finished. A third explosion rocked the training area, and Maya realized with growing horror that the opposing force was using the building's structural damage to create new tactical advantages. They weren't just defending a position, they were actively reshaping the battlefield to their advantage. Jesus Christ, Peterson's voice crackled over the radio, they're bringing the whole building down. Maya could see the truth of his words. The Delta operators were using controlled demolitions to create firing lanes and eliminate cover, turning the training facility into a three-dimensional puzzle that only they understood. Her teammates were being systematically hunted by operators who had turned urban warfare into an art form. Team leader, you need to get out of there, Maya transmitted urgently. They're herding you into a kill zone. Where? I can't see anything. Maya's scope swept across the battlefield, identifying threats and opportunities with mechanical precision. She could see the trap being set, Delta operators positioning themselves to catch Jackson's team in a crossfire that would end the exercise in complete defeat. There, she called out, spotting a gap in the enemy's coverage. Drainage tunnel at your 6 o'clock, approximately 50 meters. It leads under the building. That's not on the map. The map is wrong, Maya replied with absolute certainty. Trust me. Jackson hesitated for a crucial moment, and Maya could see Delta operators moving to close the escape route. In seconds, her teammates would be completely surrounded with no hope of extraction. "Move now," she commanded, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had guided soldiers through real combat. "That tunnel is your only way out." Finally, Jackson's team began moving toward the drainage tunnel, but Maya could see they were too slow. The Delta operators had anticipated their movement and were positioning for the final assault. Her teammates were about to be caught in the open with nowhere to hide. That's when Maya heard the voice that would change everything. "Control to all stations," came a new transmission, calm and authoritative. "Exercise parameters are being modified again. Iron Wolf Sniper, you are cleared hot. Repeat, Iron Wolf Sniper, you are cleared hot." Maya's blood froze. Someone in the command structure knew her call sign, her real call sign from Afghanistan. Someone who understood exactly what she was capable of when the gloves came off. "Iron Wolf Sniper, this is SEAL Commander Tors," the voice continued, and Maya recognized the name from the briefing materials. Tors was a legend in the special operations community, a man whose reputation was built on impossible missions and zero casualties. "You have multiple friendlies in immediate danger. You are authorized to engage all hostile targets. Take the shot." Maya's world narrowed to the scope of her rifle. Her breathing slowed, her heartbeat steadied, and the chaos of the battlefield faded to absolute silence. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the chance to show these elite operators what Iron Wolf really meant. The first target was the Delta sniper who had been systematically destroying her team. Range, 847 meters. Wind, 3 mph from the east. Target, partially concealed behind concrete debris. Maya's finger found the trigger, and for the first time since arriving at Fort Braxton, she felt completely at home. The shot rang out across the desert like thunder, and 847 meters away, a Delta Force operator cursed as training rounds exploded across his position, marking him as eliminated from the exercise. But Maya was already acquiring her second target. The first shot echoed across the training facility like a declaration of war, and in that instant, everything changed. Maya Chen was no longer the dismissed outsider relegated to the sidelines. She had become Iron Wolf, the legendary sniper whose reputation was whispered in the darkest corners of Afghanistan's mountains. 847 meters away, Master Sergeant Rick "Viper" Morrison, a Delta Force operator with 15 years of combat experience, stared in disbelief at the bright orange paint splattered across his chest. He'd been positioned in what he considered an impregnable sniper nest, concealed behind debris with multiple escape routes planned. The shot had come through a gap no wider than a coffee cup, threading between concrete chunks with surgical precision. "What the hell?" Morrison's voice crackled over the opposing force frequency. "Who made that shot?" But Maya was already gone, her scope tracking to the second target before the sound of her first shot had even reached its destination. Her breathing remained steady, her heartbeat a metronome of calm in the chaos below. This was her element, the place where physics and instinct merged into something approaching art. The second target was more challenging, a Delta machine gunner positioned behind an overturned vehicle, laying down suppressing fire that kept Jackson's team pinned. Range, 623 meters. Wind, shifting. Target, mobile and alert. Maya led the target by 18 inches, accounting for his movement pattern and the slight crosswind that would push her bullet left. The shot broke clean, and she watched through her scope as the machine gunner spun and dropped, orange paint blooming across his shoulder like a deadly flower. "Sniper, sniper!" The Delta operator's radio chatter exploded with urgent warnings. "We have a hostile sniper engaging from long range." But Maya was already acquiring her third target, and this one made her smile grimly. Captain James "Reaper" Sullivan was Delta Force's premier sniper, a man whose kill count in Iraq and Syria had earned him legendary status. He was positioned in a fourth-floor window, nearly invisible behind camouflage netting, believing himself untouchable at 934 meters. Sullivan was good. Maya could see him scanning for her position through his own scope, trying to locate the threat that had just eliminated two of his teammates. But he was looking in the wrong direction, assuming the shots had come from ground level rather than the water tower that most snipers would consider too distant for accurate fire. Maya's crosshairs settled on the barely visible outline of Sullivan's rifle barrel. It was an impossible shot by conventional standards, a target the size of a pencil at nearly 1,000 meters, partially obscured by debris and camouflage. But Maya had made impossible shots before, in places where missing meant watching good soldiers die. The rifle bucked against her shoulder, and she watched Sullivan's weapon fly from his hands as the training round struck the barrel with perfect precision. Through her scope, she could see his shocked expression as he realized he'd been outgunned by someone he couldn't even see. "Jesus Christ," Sullivan's voice came over the radio, filled with professional respect. That was a hell of a shot. But Maya wasn't finished. Her scope swept across the battlefield, identifying targets with mechanical efficiency. A Delta operator trying to flank Jackson's position from the east, eliminated with a shot through a window opening no bigger than a dinner plate. Another machine gunner attempting to set up in the building's lobby, taken down with a bullet that ricocheted off a concrete wall to strike him from an impossible angle. "Iron Wolf, this is team leader," Jackson's voice crackled over the radio, and for the first time since Maya had met him, there was no condescension in his tone. "I count 5 hostile eliminations. How copy?" "Copy 5 confirmed," Maya replied, her voice steady as she continued scanning for targets. "You have a clear path to the drainage tunnel. Move now." Jackson's team began advancing, but Maya could see the Delta operators adapting to her intervention. They were professionals who understood that a single sniper, no matter how skilled, couldn't cover every angle. New threats were emerging from positions she couldn't engage from her current location. "Team leader, you have hostiles moving to cut off your escape route," Maya transmitted. 2 operators approaching from the south, using the rubble pile for concealment. "I can't see them," Jackson replied, his voice tight with stress. "Trust me," Maya said, and this time there was no hesitation in Jackson's response. "Copy that, Iron Wolf, guide us in." Maya began calling out enemy positions with the precision of a GPS system, her elevated position giving her a god's eye view of the tactical situation. "Hostile at your 2 o'clock, 150 meters behind the blue container. He's got a clear shot on your position." The shot rang out before she finished speaking, and 150 meters away, another Delta operator found himself marked for elimination. Maya's ability to engage targets her teammates couldn't even see was turning the tide of the battle in ways that defied conventional tactical doctrine. "How is she making these shots?" Rodriguez's voice carried a note of awe. "I can't even see half these targets." "Iron Wolf sees everything," Thompson replied, and Maya could hear the newfound respect in his voice. "Just follow her guidance." But the Delta operators weren't giving up. Maya watched as they began using smoke grenades to obscure her sight lines, filling the battlefield with thick gray clouds that reduced visibility to mere meters. It was a smart tactical decision. If they couldn't eliminate her, they could at least neutralize her advantage. "Smoke deployment," Maya reported. "I'm losing visual on multiple sectors." "Can you still guide us?" Jackson asked. Maya studied the shifting smoke patterns, using her knowledge of wind direction and thermal currents to predict where the concealment would be thickest. "Affirmative. The smoke will clear in the eastern sector first. You'll have a window of approximately 30 seconds to reach the tunnel entrance." 30 seconds, Peterson's voice was incredulous. "That's not enough time." "It is if you move fast and trust my guidance," Maya replied. "On my mark, mark." Jackson's team burst from cover like sprinters leaving the blocks, moving with the desperate speed of soldiers who knew their lives depended on following orders without question. Maya tracked their movement through her scope, simultaneously watching for threats emerging from the smoke. "Contact left," she called out as a Delta operator appeared through the haze, his rifle tracking toward Jackson's position. Maya's shot took him down before he could fire, the training round striking center mass with devastating accuracy. "Hostile behind you." Another threat, another impossible shot through swirling smoke and debris. Maya was operating on pure instinct now, her years of combat experience allowing her to engage targets that existed more as shadows than solid forms. Jackson's team reached the drainage tunnel with seconds to spare, disappearing into the concrete passage just as Delta reinforcements arrived at their previous position. Maya had guided them through a gauntlet that should have been impossible to survive, using her skills to turn certain defeat into tactical victory. "Team leader to Iron Wolf," Jackson's voice came over the radio, and Maya could hear something she'd never heard from him before: genuine gratitude. "Outstanding work. We're in the tunnel and moving toward the objective." But Maya knew the exercise wasn't over. The Delta operators were regrouping, adapting their tactics to account for her intervention. She could see them moving through the building, setting up new positions that would challenge her ability to provide overwatch. "Iron Wolf, this is Commander Tors," came the authoritative voice that had first cleared her to engage. "Sitrep. 7 hostile eliminations confirmed," Maya reported. "Friendly team has reached the tunnel system and is advancing on the objective. Opposing force is adapting tactics and deploying countermeasures." "Copy that. Be advised, the exercise parameters are being modified again. You are now cleared to relocate and engage at will." Maya felt a surge of adrenaline. Being cleared to relocate meant she could leave her static position and become a mobile threat, the kind of tactical flexibility that turned good snipers into legends. She began breaking down her position, preparing to move to a new vantage point that would give her different angles on the battlefield. The climb down from the water tower was treacherous with her rifle and equipment, but Maya moved with the fluid efficiency of someone who had done this countless times under enemy fire. She hit the ground running, using her knowledge of the terrain to move toward a position that would give her overwatch of the building's interior. "Iron Wolf is mobile," she reported, moving to secondary position. As she ran, Maya could hear the battle continuing inside the building. Jackson's team had reached the objective area, but the Delta operators were making them fight for every room. The sound of simulated gunfire echoed through the concrete structure, punctuated by the occasional explosion of flashbang grenades. Maya reached her new position, a partially collapsed wall that gave her sight lines into the building's interior through blown-out windows. From here, she could see the tactical situation developing inside the structure, where her teammates were engaged in close-quarters combat with some of the world's most elite operators. "Team leader, this is Iron Wolf," she transmitted. "I have visual on your position. You have hostiles in the room above you, preparing to drop grenades through the floor." "Copy that," Jackson replied. "Can you engage?" Maya studied the target through her scope. The Delta operators were positioned directly above Jackson's team, using holes in the floor to prepare an attack that would devastate the assault force. It was a complex shot. She would need to fire through a window, ricochet the bullet off a concrete wall, and strike targets that were partially concealed behind debris. "Affirmative," Maya replied. "Take cover." The shot was a masterpiece of applied physics and intuitive understanding of ballistics. Maya's bullet entered through a third-floor window, struck a concrete pillar at precisely the right angle, and ricocheted into the room above Jackson's position. The training round struck the lead Delta operator center mass, marking him for elimination just as he was about to drop a simulated grenade. "Holy shit," came a voice over the Delta frequency. "Did she just make a ricochet shot from outside the building?" "Confirmed," replied another voice, filled with professional admiration. That was textbook advanced marksmanship. But Maya was already tracking to her next target. The remaining Delta operators in the upper room were scrambling to new positions, trying to maintain their tactical advantage despite losing their leader. She could see them moving through the debris, their movements betraying their positions to her trained eye. Second hostile, same room, Maya reported, engaging. This shot was even more complex, a moving target partially concealed behind a concrete barrier, requiring her to lead the target while accounting for the bullet's path through multiple obstacles. The round found its mark with surgical precision, and another Delta operator found himself eliminated from the exercise. Iron Wolf, this is team leader. Jackson's voice carried a note of amazement. I don't know how you're making these shots, but keep it up. We're advancing on the final objective. Maya continued her deadly work, systematically eliminating threats that her teammates couldn't even see. Her reputation as Iron Wolf hadn't been built on luck or favorable conditions. It had been forged in the crucible of real combat, where every shot meant the difference between life and death for the soldiers depending on her. As Jackson's team fought their way through the building's upper floors, Maya provided overwatch that bordered on the supernatural. She engaged targets through windows, around corners, and through gaps in debris that seemed impossible to exploit. Each shot was a demonstration of skills honed through years of combat experience and thousands of hours of training. Final room, Jackson reported. We have visual on the objective. Maya could see the tactical situation developing. The remaining Delta operators had made their last stand in the building's top floor, using the hostage scenario to create a complex tactical puzzle. Jackson's team would need to neutralize the threats without endangering the simulated hostages, a challenge that required perfect coordination and split-second timing. Iron Wolf, can you provide precision fire support? Jackson asked. Maya studied the situation through her scope. The Delta operators were positioned behind cover that protected them from ground-level assault, but her elevated angle gave her sight lines that her teammates couldn't exploit. It would require shots of extraordinary precision, threading bullets through gaps measured in inches. Affirmative, Maya replied. I have solutions on all hostile positions, on your signal. All stations, this is team leader. Jackson's voice carried the authority of a man who had finally learned to trust his sniper. Iron Wolf will provide precision fire support. When she engages, we assault. Copy. Copy, came the unified response from his team. Maya settled into her firing position, her breathing slowing to the rhythm that had carried her through 100 combat missions. Through her scope, she could see the Delta operators preparing for the final assault, their positions carefully chosen to maximize their defensive advantage. But they had made one crucial mistake. They had underestimated Iron Wolf. Iron Wolf, you are cleared to engage, Jackson commanded. Maya's finger found the trigger, and in the space of 12 seconds, she fired 4 shots that would become legendary in the special operations community. Each bullet found its target with impossible precision, threading through gaps that seemed too small to exploit, striking with accuracy that defied the laws of physics. The first shot eliminated the Delta team leader, a ricochet off a metal beam that struck him from an angle he couldn't have anticipated. The second took down the machine gunner, a direct shot through a window opening no bigger than a paperback book. The third and fourth shots came so quickly they seemed simultaneous, eliminating the remaining threats with surgical precision. All hostiles down, Maya reported, her voice steady despite the extraordinary display of marksmanship she had just delivered. Objective area is clear. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the Delta operators, men who had seen the best snipers in the world, were stunned by the demonstration they had just witnessed. Over the radio, Maya could hear whispered conversations filled with professional respect and amazement. Exercise complete, came Commander Tor's voice over the command frequency. All stations, return to base for debrief. As Jackson's team emerged from the building, Maya could see the change in their demeanor. They moved differently now, with the confidence of soldiers who knew they had the best overwatch in the world protecting them. When they reached her position, their faces showed a mixture of awe and newfound respect. "Iron Wolf," Jackson said, extending his hand. "I owe you an apology, and my life if this had been real." Maya shook his hand, seeing genuine respect in his eyes for the first time. "We're a team." She replied simply, "That's how teams work." "Damn right we are," Peterson added, his earlier hostility completely gone. "I've never seen shooting like that. Where did you learn to make shots like those?" Maya's hand unconsciously moved to the wolf-shaped scar on her neck. "Afghanistan," she said quietly, "Kandahar province, when missing meant watching good soldiers die." The weight of her words settled over the group like a shroud. These men were elite operators, but Maya had been forged in a crucible they were only beginning to understand. Her skills weren't the product of training exercises and simulations. They had been earned in the mountains of Afghanistan, where Taliban fighters had learned to fear the shadow of Iron Wolf. "How many?" Rodriguez asked quietly. "Confirmed kills." Maya's voice was matter-of-fact. 87, but that's not what matters. What matters is the soldiers who made it home because someone was watching over them. Commander Torres appeared as if from nowhere, his weathered face showing the kind of respect reserved for true warriors. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying absolute authority, "you just witnessed the soldier who holds the military record for longest confirmed kill. Iron Wolf didn't earn that call sign in training. She earned it by keeping men like you alive when it mattered most." The revelation hit Jackson's team like a physical blow. They had dismissed and marginalized a soldier whose combat record exceeded their combined experience. Maya could see the shame and embarrassment in their faces, but also something more important, genuine respect and the beginning of understanding. "The Taliban commander who gave her that scar," Torres continued, pointing to Maya's neck, "had sworn to carve his mark into every American soldier he killed. He was hunting our patrols, picking off our people one by one. Iron Wolf spent 3 days in a hide site, waiting for the shot that would end his reign of terror." Maya remembered that shot. 247 meters through a window no bigger than a dinner plate, with crosswinds that would have defeated most snipers. The Taliban commander had been there one moment and gone the next, eliminated by a bullet he never saw coming. "One shot, one kill," Torres concluded, and an entire region of Afghanistan became safer for American soldiers. Jackson stepped forward, his face serious. "Ma'am, I request permission to learn from you. We all do." Maya looked at the faces surrounding her, elite operators who had finally recognized her true worth. For the first time since arriving at Fort Braxton, she felt like she belonged. "Call me Iron Wolf," she said with a slight smile, "and let's get to work."